You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. Welcome to First Contact, a podcast celebrating the world of Star Trek The Next Generation with a skip in its step and a smile on its face. I'm Andrew.
I'm James.
And I'm Alex.
This week we've been watching The Bonding. It was written by Ronald D. Moore and directed by Winrich Kobe. James, what on earth happens in this episode?
An Enterprise away team is investigating an apparently uninhabited planet when disaster strikes and a big explosion goes off right in their faces. The team are successfully beamed up, but Lieutenant Marla Asta is dead on arrival, and Crusher can't even be bothered trying to save her because she isn't a series regular. His son is now an orphan, but luckily aliens want to adopt him and create a perfect world where he can grow up. Picard thinks this might not be healthy, and he should really suppress his grief, as has become the custom in the 24th century. Worf wants to bond with the kid too, because of guilt. And we haven't had a Klingon ceremony in about 2 weeks. He does that, and then everything is okay. So that's nice.
Alex, you've never seen this episode before, except that you have, because we're talking about it right now. But what did you think of it?
Well, have you ever been to the cinema and had popcorn, and then you find out that although you just wanted one of either sweet or you wanted salty, and it's come out and it's come mixed, and there's the nice bits and then there's the foul, disgusting bits.
Right? No, that's never happened to me.
Oh, I think it's terrible. There's a lot of cross contamination between the scoops and cinemas, and it really should be cracked down upon. I mean, it's why I won't go to a multiplex anymore. I just really fancy some popcorn. It's a mixed bag. Some stuff is nice to explore. Some of the ways that it's dealt with are kind of like beating you over the head with a sledgehammer.
Yeah, I agree. I actually quite like this episode. It's the first episode written by Ronald D. Moore as part of an open script submissions policy, and that's going to prove very important. He's going to become a very important figure in Star Trek. It's Michael Pillar's first official show as showrunner, and he, as well, is probably the biggest and most significant figure in making Star Trek a success and good in this era. So there's a lot of stuff coming together, and I like the stuff that's being addressed as well. Finally, the problem of there being children on a starship, which has never felt right, and we've mentioned it here, but actually someone in the writing staff has gone, oh, maybe we should deal with this, and actually have Picard say, this is a ridiculous policy, why on earth should this happen, how can we possibly justify that?
Yeah, but the main problem with that is that what happens is, I've always thought having children on board the ship may not be the best of ideas. Yes, Captain, you might be right. Yes.
You say one of the writers finally said that it's a bit weird having children on board, but it was, as you said, a spec script, so it was somebody from outside the show saying this.
But you get on board. Would anyone like to delve into some background of this episode a little bit before we get started? Because I like doing that. I usually save it for quick fire, but I think there's some interesting things going on here.
Proceed.
So from the book Fade In, which was never published, which was all about the writing of Star Trek The Next Generation, Michael Pillar describes the problems of working within the confines of what was known as Roddenberry's box.
Okay, nothing amusing about that.
It may surprise you to learn that when I took over as head writer, the entire writing staff of Star Trek The Next Generation was so frustrated and angry with Gene Roddenberry that they were counting the days before their contracts expired, and indeed, every one of them left at that season's end. He wouldn't let them out of the box, and they were suffocating. I don't think that surprises any of us, really, does it?
Suffocating in the box. Nothing amusing about that. Nothing.
Yeah. Yes. My first time in Roddenberry's box was during the very first episode I worked on as head writer.
Have we just hit the new children's segment of the show? Inside Roddenberry's box.
We were already in production of season 3, 4 shows were finished, 22 still to do. There were no scripts and no stories to shoot the following week. Desperate, I bought a spec script that had been sent in from an amateur writer named Ron Moore, who was about to enlist in the US Navy. It was a rough teleplay called The Bonding, and would require a lot of reworking, but I liked the idea. A female Starfleet officer is killed in an accident, and her child, overcome with grief, bonds with a holographic recreation of his mother rather than accept her death. I sent a short description of the story to Rick Berman and Gene Roddenberry. Minutes later, I was called to an urgent meeting in Gene's office. "This doesn't work," he said. "In the 24th century, no one grieves. Death is an accepted part of life." As I shared the dilemma with the other staff writers, they took a bit of pleasure from my loss of virginity in Gene Roddenberry's box, all of them having been badly bruised by rejections from Gene. Roddenberry was adamant that in the 24th century, man would evolve past the petty emotional turmoil that gets in the way of our happiness today. Well, as any writer will tell you, emotional turmoil, petty or otherwise, is the core of any good drama. It creates conflict between characters, but Gene didn't want conflict between our characters. "All the problems of mankind have been solved," he said. "Earth is a paradise. Now, go write a drama."
And you know, this episode would have been so much better if it was about a child on the holodeck recreating his mother.
So what he did was he said, "I will adhere to the vision and I will try and actually work it out." So when his mother dies, he doesn't act with grief because that's the rules of this universe, which just seems so ridiculous, having dealt with the death of Tasha Yar, which I think everyone sort of was quite emotional about. And if you've watched The Wrath of Khan, the whole thing is about loss and grief and humanity still being kind of petty and revenge driven, but fine. So it's actually becomes about a boy learning to grieve and learning to get in touch with humanity, which Starfleet and the human race is kind of beat out of him. It seems a little odd, but hey, I guess it works. And as Michael Piller said, Star Trek works, and it had worked for 40 years. But I don't think the original series had these same restrictions, but there you go. That's what it is.
They didn't have these restrictions. It's just that, and I feel bad for Gene Roddenberry in a way, because Gene Roddenberry bought into the hype that he'd created this magical, perfect world where everybody gets along, and then demanded that Next Generation was even more perfect and fit into this wonderful universe where everybody gets along, and racism and sexism and, well, okay, homophobia might still be there. They never address that. You know, he really bought into the hype that people had with the original series, and he demanded that this show fit into it. And in fact, actually, thinking about it, there is a future episode where he wants women kissing women and men kissing men. So he even... We'll get to that. I think that is a season 3 episode, so we will get onto that very soon.
Gene, what do you want to see in this series? I want to see women kissing women. Okay, Gene. What about the plot? Don't care. Just give me the women.
There were men kissing men as well. He mentioned men kissing men.
But in a corner.
I'm sure you're very much looking forward to the episode Captain's Holiday. You know, he bought into this vision and then he demanded it. And I feel really bad because he felt protective of this vision and he tried to enforce it, and it was the wrong thing. But I think he was doing it for the right reasons, really.
Yeah, I understand where he's coming from. I do, but it's wrong. The whole point of Kirk, Spock, McCoy, which is what Star Trek has tried to recreate again and again, in particular in Enterprise, was that, you know, that they were two very conflicting personalities, and Kirk was sort of in the middle, and that creates the drama, even though they are all on the same side and they all really want the same thing deep down. They will argue it, and they will come to a conclusion. I think Gene Roddenberry changed a lot, perhaps, post Star Trek, and his vision and his good work and the good people around him, it all got a bit confused, and
he misunderstood what made the original series so loved.
Well, so, I mean, he's turning around and basically saying, what I want is an episode where they turn around and say, Jeremy, your mother is dead. I know, it's fine. You're right, it is fine. Shall we kill off a few more people? I know a room full of dogs we could go and murder with a hammer.
yay!
Gonk.
I suppose talking about Star Trek more broadly, they tried to get around all these restrictions. In Deep Space Nine, they brought in a whole bunch of alien races so they could have conflicts, and Starfleet sort of sits in the middle there. And in Voyager, we'll have two crews from different places who have completely different philosophies, but everyone forgets about that after 2 episodes and we just move on like another dull crew. But that was the idea, but it seems a very odd way to make television. But they do absolutely make it work. So let's go to the start of the episode. There's an away team down on a planet set that they couldn't afford. That's probably fine. Troy, she's a great early warning system, isn't she?
Yeah. They're gonna die! Oh, they're dead.
Oh, good. Thanks, Troy. That was very helpful. And the one non-series regular gets killed to death, and Beverly sort of waves her finger and goes, nah, she's dead. Can't do anything. She tried harder with Tasha Yar, and I mean, she was a lot more dead.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's not beat about the bush. No one cares about the red shirt.
The blue shirt.
Nobody cares about the blue shirt.
She was the ship's archaeologist. What's she doing most of the time? Do you think she's just sort of hanging out, waiting for an archaeology mission to come up? And given the Enterprise spends most of its time escorting dignitaries, or just generally getting diverted, or having shore leave, an awful lot of that, is she just got nothing to do in general?
Sat in 10 forward, boring the tits off everyone. Did I tell you about my archaeology exams? Yes, you definitely did.
Do you find it unsettling when they tell the kid that his mother's dead and he's sort of like, yeah?
There is an air of The Omen about it.
From an audience point of view, we're supposed to identify with these people, and we really don't.
That's because we should aspire to be like them. We should find out a beloved relative has died, and we should go, alright. I cried when my rabbit died.
Well, that's a reasonable thing to do.
Yeah. I was 21 when my rabbit died, by the way. I would not be accepted in the 24th century.
So moving on.
So I guess the main plot is that an alien appears and is his mother back from the dead?
Yeah, I mean, that's not suspicious at all, is it? Mummy, you're dead. No, I'm not. Okay.
It's incredibly Star Trek, isn't it? Going right back to the cage. And even a couple of weeks ago with the survivors, it's an alien recreating a world in order to make a human feel okay. This is one of the most Star Trek ideas out there. Just an alien with the power of illusion that somehow wants to make the humans happy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to throw it out there now. This is not the strong part of the episode. The whole strong part of the episode is the fact that they're dealing with the ideas like having children on the ship, the dealing with a captain having to break the news of death to family members, all that sort of stuff. Doesn't mean that stuff isn't treated ham-fistedly, but it's still, you know, the more interesting stuff. The alien recreating a place on a hostile planet, kind of like the old people the other week, I suppose, in a way as well. It's not that interesting. We know where it's going, and the only thing that makes it worthwhile is the speech from Picard at the end. Although, even then, it's a bit smug and sanctimonious.
Ronald D. Moore didn't make any changes to the script from his initial spec script, I seem to remember he said. So, all of these changes were Melinda Snodgrass and Michael Piller.
I suppose what you would say is that, at the very least, it is exploring the human condition using a science fiction story. So it's doing what Star Trek should do, even if it's not executed perhaps as well as it might have been.
Ronald D. Moore said in an AOL chat in 1997 that it was completely out of his hands after he sold the script. So all of the stuff that we liked was the stuff that Ronald D. Moore basically had built, and then all of the new stuff about the alien was the additional stuff to work around Gene Roddenberry's restrictions.
This was his first ever script, let's not forget, or I imagine he'd done some spec scripts before, but he was new. Michael Piller is a veteran writer. I imagine he knocked out a lot of the story problems. He has said it was a rough script, but the core idea is really interesting. And also it does allow you to use Wesley in a slightly interesting way. I think he has quite a nice scene, better than him just saying "I, Captain," or saving the day, explaining what it's like losing someone in Starfleet, which is something that happens a lot. And we did lose all the red shirts. This is exploring the wider ramifications, so it's taking something that is every day in Star Trek and actually making it mean something, making it count, making the red shirt actually matter, be a human, have a human life and an existence beyond just being there to be killed. So again, it's good ideas.
It's something you get from bringing in someone outside of the core group of writers. You get someone who has a slightly different way of looking at it, someone who questions a core idea. I mean, it's the kind of thing that you might see in something else. It's something that we saw fairly recently in Doctor Who. There was an episode that dealt with why doesn't the Doctor travel with people that live for much longer times, people who are, in all intents and purposes, immortal like he is, and having an episode that dealt with that. But that's what you get when you bring in someone from outside of those core people. You need someone to come in with an idea that shakes things up. The problem is when you dilute their idea by taking it off in a different direction that makes it less interesting. And as I say, that's not to say that all of the stuff that is interesting is dealt with well, because the Klingon ceremony, for one thing, is not.
The whole story with Worf, I think it's very underwritten and underexplored. It feels like it should be a bigger part of the episode, but it's almost just a couple of scenes. Worf is feeling guilty.
Well, he's bought all those candles, and there's just no one's going to come. No one's going to come and appreciate his candle party. He's bought a knife for the occasion to trim back the wax. Not one person came. Not one person said thank you for the vol au vents.
It just seems like he should have more scenes with the child and maybe try and build up a relationship before they have this moment at the end. And it doesn't really set right. They've got the Wesley element, and they've got the Worf element, and they've got a bit of Troy being an actual counsellor and helping people deal with grief, but it feels like they could have condensed that down to one character's actions and actually built up a single stronger relationship with the child, because I don't...
You do sound like Picard when you say the child.
Ian?
Very good. With Jeremy, because that would have helped us identify a bit more. I don't feel we ever engage with him, and that's the problem of the writing as well, because he's just sitting there with his iPad watching home movies whenever they happen to be made, and I don't care about this kid especially, and I think we need to see it through the eyes of a single character more to maybe engage a bit more.
The resolution to the Worf thing is particularly ridiculous. You hate him, don't you? Because he didn't die and your mother did. You're right. I do hate him because he didn't die and my mother did. Let's be brothers. What? Where was that leap come from?
The whole thing as well is that Troy's conclusion is he can never really experience a full life in an artificial environment. And then the conclusion is, let's go to the holodeck and do something.
It is strange that when I was thinking about this episode before I rewatched it, I did think it was a Worf episode. My overriding memory was the whole Worf and Jeremy lighting the candles and everything was nice again.
Well, the bonding as well, that's the name of the ceremony, and I suppose it also refers to the alien as well, bonding with the child, the energy alien that lives on a desolate planet. It also refers to that, but the ceremony is the bonding ceremony to make them brothers. Will this child ever appear again? No, of course not.
Well, that's only because they hated the actor that played the kid. I've got the quote here. Moore later added, I was not a big fan of the actor playing Jeremy. So in that sense, I wasn't disappointed at all, referring to the fact that Jeremy never returns. Which I think it's a bit harsh on a 12-year-old. When child actors are on TV, you do kind of cringe and think, okay, they're not very good, but it's because they're child actors.
Yeah. There have been far more annoying children on the Enterprise before now.
Yeah, actually, I didn't think the kid playing Jeremy did badly.
No, he was sort of largely emotionless. And thanks to Gene, that's the role that they wanted. It seemed to me that he was doing what they wanted from him in the script. I just didn't necessarily agree with what the script was asking. But, that's not the fault of the actor.
There's the obligatory scene where Data tries to learn something about humanity, and he talks to Riker, and he said, how well did you know her? I spent some time with her. And that's loaded, isn't it? I've spent some time with all the women on the Enterprise.
And the strange thing about that conversation between Data and Riker, they're talking about how badly they felt the loss of Tasha, which kind of goes right against Gene Roddenberry's perfect vision of everybody accepting death.
Except when it's one of the bridge crew.
Alright.
We accept it if, we don't know them. Then it's fine.
Alright, so if Spock's dying, if Tasha Yar is dying, that's okay.
I think it's basically, did they have a surname? Or indeed, in many cases, a name.
Spock?
Spock.
What is Spock's first name?
Spock.
No, she has a name. It's Lieutenant Maria Astor. Don't you know Lieutenant Maria Astor?
Yeah, but someone did actually care that she died.
There is a lot of Jeremy Astor being said in this episode in a most unnatural way, and you sort of accept it when Worf does it, but then it seems everybody's just calling him Jeremy Astor, which makes me wonder how many Jeremys are on board the Enterprise.
Well, you wouldn't know it, but Beadle's about, just in disguise.
Anyway, in a haphazard sort of way, I feel we've covered that episode sufficiently. Would anyone like to sum it up with any thoughts of their own?
It occurred.
Thanks for that. James?
It feels like that there are still holdovers from the Season 1, Season 2 style storytelling, and that leaks into this episode and makes it not as good. Basically, as they get further and further away from Gene Roddenberry's restrictions, the better the show seems to get, unfortunately. I say unfortunately because I do genuinely feel bad for Gene Roddenberry. I don't want to stick the knife in too much because, he was trying to protect a legacy, I guess. even though he didn't really care about the show in season 3 of the original series, when he abandoned it completely.
I think everything you're saying there is fair, though. We're still at a point where a good idea can be offset by a fairly bland going over of something that we've already seen before, earlier on in the series and in previous series as well. And it brings down the rest of the episode by association, which is a shame. But it certainly feels like a stepping stone in the right direction.
It is the new writers that they're bringing in, as the old writers from season 1 and 2, the ones who were brought in from the original series and who are going to be a part of phase 2. As they've gone, the show has basically improved. It stopped feeling like they just continued the original series, or are maybe doing a prequel in terms of how it treats certain subjects. As in, it feels like it's in the 50s with some of the... Code of Honor feels like it could have been made in the 1950s.
Yeah, I think it takes original series ideas and puts an interesting sort of 1980s spin on them, and it almost comes off, but not quite. But yeah, it's more interesting and there's more to talk about than lots of episodes in the past. But anyway, let's share some random bits and bobs in the place we call Quickfire.
Quickfire.
Michael Piller, his philosophy when he came in, he said to the writing staff there were 2 requirements for every episode. Every episode is going to be about a character's growth, and every episode has to be about something. So that's new, and that's generally positive.
So, turning to that old perennial favourite, the Nitpicker's Guide for Next Generation Trekkers, we can see that it says nothing interesting whatsoever.
In the Astor's quarters, there's a model of a Constitution class vessel, refit, just like the Enterprise in the movies. That's pretty exciting, isn't it? Did you notice that?
Well, did you notice the most exciting moment of the episode when they were in the computer access room?
No.
No, that's the only time it appears outside of Evolution.
Is that the one that Worf was in when Troy spoke to him?
Yeah.
Why was he there?
He's gonna blow her up or something.
Marla Astor will be mentioned once again in the season 5 episode Ethics. We're all looking forward to that. Fun fact, it's revealed in this episode that Worf was 6 years old when his parents were massacred.
Hooray!
Thanks once again for listening, everyone. It's been a real pleasure to share these audio ramblings with you. We'll be back again when we'll be talking about Booby Trap. I hope.
Booby.
I hope you'll join us then. Goodbye.
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 Does anyone have any concerns about the childcare provision on the Enterprise? It seems they just leave them alone there. Is that okay? Are we okay with that? Or are children just so boring in the 24th century that they just don't do anything?
They have secret cameras hidden around all of his rooms, which Chief O'Brien monitors because he needs something to do while he's at the transporter pad.
Right.
I'm all alone now. Jeremy, on the Starship Enterprise, no one is alone. No one. Except for Chief O'Brien. We leave him down there. We leave him with his cello. We really don't want to hear it. It's really quite awful.